Are we live? Well, hello, dear friends. How are you? How is Washington and Tijuana doing?
Still
Doing well.
breathing.
Doing well.
So we have this our second attempt of improvising some intelligent nonsense based on something that has happened to us. So it's important to tell our little audience that we're very spontaneous about this. We usually the subject comes up regarding things that we've written about or we've talked about in the last week. And so we usually build up a very good starting point, but from there on it's free reign, and therefore and thus the people that are online can throw questions on the chat, and we will integrate them because we really don't have a chartered schedule on what we're going to do, which is something that Hal loves. And therefore the subject for today started with our relation to work. Basically, I would say we are on our third stage of life, on our third turn of the Saturn cycle, and we have accumulated a lot of experience in our lives. All three of us, we have worked in many different things, and we have also helped a lot of people. We have created employment, and we have supported colleagues and friends and enemies and frenemies. And now we're reaching a period in our life in which at times we three sometimes we need help, particularly in the area of work. Sometimes we basically need to stabilize our income somehow, but we either have a hard time requesting for help because we're proud, or we are aggrieved because nobody's helping us, and so we're in a feeling of aggrievement, or we are simply depressed because life has been unfair to us, whereas we have tried to be fair to others. Okay, so you have here three very potent examples
World's
of this.
smallest violin.
We have here three perfect examples of this situation. Um, so this thing started with a problem that at present Daniel and I are sharing, which is we have been unable to find a stable work and a stable form of income, and we've reached extreme levels of
Poverty.
necessity.
Extreme
Yeah,
poverty.
poverty,
Extreme poverty. Extreme level of poverty.
poverty, and we wanted to, we're also very well versed in our professions. We're very good designers or film producers or scientists, but we're faced with the situation that we have to work on anything to survive, and therefore we encountered a lot of problems, which is what happened with my career. Do I just dump it and ask for any kind of work, which is a first problem, and then a second problem is do I ask for work, or do I wait for somebody to rediscover me and my talents? And finally, is it important to focus only on work, on monetizing my time, or is it rather relevant also to use my time on being generous and making a contribution to the world, because what goes around comes around? I would say that this is a very good synthesis on the problematic that we face every day, which is, can I just not work? Do I need to ask for work, or should I just do stuff and work will solve itself somehow? So there is a basic question of justice here. Who is the guy that is imparting justice on our lives? Is it God, or is it the gods in plural, or is there no God and we're just walking around life in a nihilistic or absurdist temperament? Temperament is also a very important word, which is, how do we face this? Do we face this with humor? Do we face this aggrieved, or do we face this with faith? Yes. Oh, I thought you were.
You left out simulators as well as one possibility, in addition to God or gods, maybe simulator or simulators.
Simulators. Okay. And so I'm going to start being very religious, which is, I'm going to compare the Old Testament with the New Testament, in which basically the Old Testament, to me, a very good summary of the Old Testament is an eye for an eye. Okay, which is, you do to me what I do to you, and that can be very positive or it can be very destructive. And this philosophy, which I do not share, I do not live my life under an eye for an eye. I prefer to avoid grievances, and I prefer not to be so vindicative, although I'm very Italian and therefore I do have a heart for revenge. But but
I'll
revenge
keep that in
also can
mind.
turn around. If we get vengeful and we get, we go into revenge after revenge after revenge, then it will come back to us, and it will come back to us in a very negative manner, and it will probably not solve the question on what do I do with my time, how do I monetize my time, and if I don't monetize my time, what do I do with my time that is a contribution to me and to further generations, so that I leave a planet that is better than the planet that I received. And so the question of compassion, in a very Jesus Christ sense, comes over, which is basically the main contribution of Jesus, in my point of view, in the New Testament, is when you get aggrieved, when somebody attacks you, show the other chin, take it, yeah, take it, accept it, and try to shift the situation in a different manner. Grow virtue, become more virtuous, make of your enemy somebody more virtuous. Another way to look at this is reciprocity, which is, be fair to those who are fair to you and ignore those who are unfair to you. Just leave them behind, and focus on people with whom you have some kind of back and forth, which is of the essence of the relation that we three have. I would say we're very good at giving and receiving from each other in a very intellectual, but also very generous and also very intuitive manner. And finally, this is a contribution of how altruism, which is maybe we need to sacrifice ourselves, to an extreme level, like Maximilian Kolbe. We can give our life for the good life of other people, or we can, I don't know, we can be socialist, and just be worried about the greater good for everyone and not just my own greater good, or even in a more sophisticated manner. Ask for help, because when we ask for help, we're teaching the other person to be more virtuous, because the other person then has to prove himself or herself and has to be generous in order to take our call, which would be, I would say, the essence of altruism, and the people that now practice it even at an institutional level. Okay, that would be an introduction. So, thoughts?
And you there's a lot there. Go ahead, Hal, if you want
There's
to
a
go
lot
ahead.
there. There's an awful lot there. And, when I give of myself, one of the things I would point out, and I have any expectation of something in return, I'm not doing giving. I'm doing business. I'm making it transactional. And so much of our mindset these days is transactional. I did this for you. You did this for me. I remember I approached my relationships that way when I was younger, into my 30s, I believe, probably maybe even after that. I don't know. But this is the point. If I'm really giving, then the gift is without attachment, without
That's the
any.
definition of favor. People have forgotten the definition of the word favor, and I wrote this
Go
thing
ahead.
about this. I've done many times. That there's favors. That's the point of a favor. There's no expectation of anything in return, and you can say no to a favor with and there should be no negative consequences of that. That you can't. If someone asks you for a favor and you say no, you have no. There's no justification for being upset about that. You're asking them to do something they normally wouldn't do, and so they can say no for any reason, even if it's not a justified reason or a real reason. They can make up a reason. It doesn't really matter. You cannot hold it against them. And that's the thing about favor asking and favor giving. I think people have really forgotten that there's a difference between a favor and a transaction, as you said, Hal. And people view all relationships as transactional, and it's not the case when it comes to favor, favor giving and favor doing for people.
One of the things too is if I am asking for help, or if someone asks me for help, and I have an opportunity then to do an act of love, of giving without expectation of return. And I think that's really a gift to give to someone else, is that opportunity. And please take this opportunity to do an act of love. Offerings are very much welcome.
Yeah. And you can't complain if they do it wrong. There is no wrong. That's the other thing about favor asking. If someone genuinely attempts to do a favor for you, even if they do it in a way that you do not think is correct, or they do it in a way that doesn't meet your expectations, you have absolutely zero reason to be upset about it, and you cannot hold it against the person. Again, that's not a favor. That is a form of extortion, a sort of a subtle form of extortion.
Yes.
You cannot hold that against them. I mean, even if they are a complete idiot and they screw it up completely, it doesn't matter. They had good intentions. You were asking them for a favor, which is to do something they normally would not do, which might put them out some, and they didn't do it the way you expected, or perhaps the smart way. That doesn't matter. You still cannot be upset or hold it against them in any way, no matter how much it inconveniences you.
And this brings to mind the very big idea of enablement. where someone might ask for help, and actually your best bet is to not give help because it will actually cause them to suffer as a result. Like the guy who's panhandling on the street, and you know he's going to use it for drugs or booze or whatever. It's not good necessarily to give that way. It is better to give to social institutions that support these people and to help them to get better, perhaps. But it isn't really, it actually ends up, though it might make me feel better in the moment to give the guy $20 and walk away, or even a buck.
Yeah. I
That
tend
is
to I tend to disagree only
also,
because of when you say it's impossible to know
well, maybe
what
impossible to
anybody's
know.
gonna do with
However,
anything.
there's a
I
likelihood that the condition has been
Again,
proved
that is a bias. That's a prejudice based on
possibly.
have you been in that situation before? And probably not. And so
No,
the expectation that
I
all these
feel
people that are
temporary
bums are
mostly.
drug addicts or alcoholics or whatever is not the case. Many of them are mentally ill. In fact, a
But
huge
in your
proportion are
case,
mentally ill.
enablement of the situation that keeps a perpetuation of a suffering
Yeah,
is actually a harm versus a help. So knowing
I would
how to
agree.
help is important.
Okay, but
Right?
I see that we all three share that it is important to contribute, to give,
Yeah,
but when we get requested the help, we become a little bit suspicious
can
or worried about our biases or worried about
if we think deeply.
if we
A
think
lot of
deeply.
times we're just thoughtless. I mean, most people don't think deeply.
Yeah, right.
I think many
Yeah,
people don't think
uh,
deeply. Let's just say many, because when I
yeah.
say most, I'm making a huge assumption, as Dan has pointed out. Thank you, Dan.
That's a
I,
question for you both. And does the act of giving, of contributing, does it entail that we sacrifice something or not?
It's an
I
opportunity, actually.
I mean,
But
you don't have to sacrifice to give. I mean, it's a more, I think it means more when you do, when the person that receives, when they recognize that you've actually sacrificed something, it means more, I think, to both parties. But that doesn't mean the other kind of giving, it isn't meaningful also. I just think there's
do we
more meaning.
really do we really see the individual we're helping, or are we just saying, "Here it is, get out of my face," you know?
Well, it's contextual, obviously, right? In some cases, you
Obviously.
see it. Certainly, I think in my career, when I've helped people, for instance, get promoted or whatever that worked for me, I mean, yeah, I saw that because they were working for me and we were friends or we were colleagues. And so I was close to them and I helped them to get ahead, to succeed. And so, yeah, I saw that and I felt that, but, and it was partly for me too. It makes me feel good. So it's not all just, altruistic. It also makes me feel good to help other people. And some people, that really drives them. And for me, that is a big driver of the things I do and it's not all altruistic. It's a lot of it is because it makes me feel better, helping people.
Right.
So that's why I try to do it. So
No, but when somebody asks something, let's first situate ourselves on the giver. Then we should situate ourselves in the receiver or the one that is asking. When we give, we necessarily have to sacrifice something, and basically money or time. But we have to give something that is not ours anymore. We either give a coin or a bill or our time, or we do some kind of errand for the other person. But we are sacrificing something that was supposedly for us, and now it's for another person. Just
Yeah, I think
yeah,
that,
but there's a difference
that is
between Bill
good.
Gates giving someone $100 and me giving someone $100. That's much more of a sacrifice for me than for someone like Bill Gates. I just to give one example. So yeah, I agree, it is a sacrifice, but there's definitely orders of magnitude of difference between people
I've
in
made
terms of
some
what they give.
sacrifices like that in the past, and when I do that, though, I do gain something. There is the feeling of having made a difference, of having moved the needle for somebody else. One of them actually is represented this little camp mug I've got here. Had to purchase it, of course, a piece of merchandise, but I also backed the Kickstarter for the young lady who did this. And in return, I did get something out of it. There's a little shout out on one of her videos of the people who supported her new album. So that felt good. And I'm actually got my name inside the gatefold of the thing, a double album. And that feels good. It feels like I did something. I left a mark. So in a way, that was a business transaction more than a pure gift. But I love the fact that this music is now out there, and I had a little bit of a role in putting it out there for other people to enjoy. So I got that little feeling of like virtue of it. Maybe that's virtue signaling actually in a way that is not very seemly. So I have to sort of, there's all these counterbalancing motivations going on of like, what are you really up to here? Why is that important to you?
I always have that question in my mind. Am I doing this for the right reasons? And if you're, as long as you're asking yourself that, I think that usually you are. If you're not asking yourself that question, then you maybe aren't, because you really need to be cognizant of that. Are you really trying to help this other person, or are you mostly trying to help yourself? Because then it's not really help. Then it's a whole different story of what you're actually doing and why. And that's, I think, if you're self-questioning, then that probably tells you you're on the right track and you're doing the right thing. If you're not questioning yourself all the time on those sorts of things, maybe you need to start questioning yourself, because maybe you're doing it more for yourself than someone else in that case. And maybe there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you're helping yourself is a good thing to do too. I'm not saying you shouldn't. You obviously have to help yourself as well. You can't just give everything. And this is the problem I see with women. I hate to be sexist here, or stereotypical, but many women just give and give and give because that's how I guess that's how they're brought up. They have to be the
Right.
giver, and
Right.
people will take and take and take and take, because that's just, people will take, because they will. I mean, men will take and other women will take, but many women just are brought up, I guess, to give and give and give and give, and it's very detrimental to the self when all you do is give. You cannot do that. You have to have something for yourself.
That
That you
reminds
can
me
draw
of The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. Are you guys familiar with that? There's a
I've heard of it,
children's
but
book called The Giving Tree, actually, and the tree just gives to this little boy until there's nothing but a stump. And the little boy by then is an old man and just doesn't have anything left in him either, and he just sits down on the stump. And the idea is you can drain people in your life. This is sort of along the idea of what I was thinking about in terms of, my own family relationship, where my father gave a lot to me in order to try to support me, and gave a lot to my sister, and basically drained himself in the process, and in some ways enabled behaviors that aren't necessarily constructive in my case. In my sister's case, I can't really make that judgment. I haven't walked a mile in her shoes. This is another thing about judgment that was picked up on by you guys about me. I can be judgmental, but I shouldn't be, because I haven't walked a mile in anybody else's shoes. Otherwise, I'd be a mile away and have their shoes.
yeah, parents, the relationship's a little bit different in my view. I mean, there's
True.
my opinion, there's an obligation as a parent to give, and I people don't always agree with this, and I think that's one of the downsides, if you want to call it, of having a kid, is you are automatically obligated for the remainder of your life to take care of this person, no matter what. Is in my opinion. Now, other people disagree. Obviously, people disagree with that, but
Kick them out by the time they're
I
18.
always I always tell my dad that. I'm like, Dad, sorry, you chose to have a kid, so you gotta cough up whatever it is I'm asking for. You're on the hook now. So it's your own choice. You didn't have to have me. So
Okay,
he
so
doesn't necessarily go for that argument.
what I gather from you both then that is that in the act of giving, in the act of sacrificing, there's two polarities. One is the one in which we drain ourselves and we give everything, and in the end we're with nothing. And in the other side, we are virtue signaling, and we're doing it to feel ourselves better and to preach and become a very boring person. To feel superior.
Self-sanctioned, right? Exactly. Self-righteous, sanctimonious.
To this polarity that you guys put,
Right.
I think the subject of virtue is very important, because I think that when we want to help somebody, we want to bring him out of his temporary misery. But a very good way of giving, of helping, is not only sorting the problem out. Yes, I can listen to you. Yes, I can give you money. Yes, I can give you a job. But what we should really push forward is to make the other person more virtuous, or help him or her resolve the future problems on her own or his own.
Teaching how to fish. Yeah.
Giving him some kind of independence, building his virtue through our generosity act. I think that's a good guide, not to be drained and not to become a self-centered, egotistical virtue signaler.
But there's a judgment there that what we think is virtuous is actually virtuous, and maybe what we think is virtuous is incorrect. So that's the downside of that kind of approach, which I tend to agree with. But what I would encourage is virtuous. Maybe someone may disagree with, and maybe they're right to disagree, because maybe I'm wrong. That what I think is virtuous actually is not. Now, of course, I'm never wrong, so that's probably not the case. But if I were,
so then,
I'm joking, dude. See, I say that kind of stuff all the time. People think I'm serious. I'm joking. Just to clarify, when I say that, I'm joking. I don't know everything. I don't know everything, and I don't think I know everything. But if I did,
okay, let's go to the other position now. Then, for a moment, let's now put ourselves in the position that we are the ones who need help. Not we are
obviously.
We are all.
I am in that position right now. Yes.
Right.
It's easy role play here.
In life, we
I like this kind of role play.
In life, we're both. We're now sharing our thoughts and our personal experiences between each other and with our listeners, as an act of generosity. So we play both roles. Now let's put ourselves a little bit in the role of we need help. So how do we approach this? How do you approach this when you need help? Do you ask for it? Do you wait for it? Do you expect it to happen? Do you get angry, furious, aggrieved, depressed because help never arrives? How do you react to it? Are you on your own?
Go ahead, Hal. You can go first.
I was going to let Dan go, but
Each
yeah,
one,
this
each
is
one on
this
his
is
own.
interesting because I've gotten to a point in my life where I really don't have many expectations. I am helped a lot by my wife. She's still working in a regular, high-paying, director level job. I'm working at daily provisions at front of house staff at minimum wage and tips, which is helpful. But I'm not doing what I used to do, which was enterprise architecture for federal government agencies. And I have not sought to get back into that mill. So I am helped a lot. And when I am in that position of needing that help and wanting it, I do feel a little bit diminished. I do feel a little bit like, well, I almost feel guilty, but I have a hard time feeling guilty, actually. This is one of my personality traits that my wife often complains about, that I don't have much of a sense of responsibility because I just drift through life feeling like I am an imp bouncing along inside of this animal that bears my label. And other than that, other people want to, put responsibility on me. I'm like, okay, fine, you can try. But my caring, I'm kind of insulated against that to some degree by life having taught me over time that, man, at the end of the story, nobody cares really. And most people don't see anybody else. They only see their projections onto, and I know I'm deviating from the question now, but I feel all kinds of things well up. And I usually am able to sort of parse them apart and say, well, in the movie, everybody dies.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
at that time, it's all basically a wash anyway. And so I'm doing the best I can to be a good husband to my wife and a good friend among friends and worker among workers. This is part of my ethos. So, do I get depressed about it? Sometimes I let myself feel things. And I find myself role playing it though, because actually having that feeling and getting it down into my nervous system as a core thing, yeah, I tend to dismiss it pretty quickly because I am well fed, right? I'm not suffering cold. I'm clothed. I've got enough clothes, too much clothes, to put on if I want to, you know. So you get the
yeah, that's
point? Go
yeah,
ahead,
and that's
Dan.
the thing we got to emphasize here too in this whole
What,
conversation is that
let's go to
we,
Dan. So
when we
Dan,
talk
how
about
do
we
Coming
talk
up
about
with this
deprivation between
approach.
Hal and
how
I talk about being deprived. This is not the same thing as real deprivation, and
No,
I've seen real deprivation. I've spent time
right.
with people on the streets and the homeless at a significant time, and I understand what real deprivation is.
Yes.
This is not real deprivation. What we're complaining about is, white male privilege crap, whatever you want to call it. So it's like very much on the low end. I can eat. I have 3 meals a day. I'm not like I'm starving. Okay, so let's make that absolutely clear. But
Thank
that
you.
doesn't mean it isn't real. But that doesn't mean it isn't real. And in my case, I have very high expectations of people, including myself. And I
Mm,
feel like I'm letting myself down. Number one, by not working, is the number one thing. I really feel like I'm letting myself down. And then number two, I feel like I'm letting my wife down, and I'm letting everybody else down who's helped
and
me in the past or
society in
invested
general, because you've got
who's invested in me. And there's just different reasons I feel that way, but it just it does anger me, yeah. And it doesn't. The anger is not at other people as much as it is at myself, which is so counterproductive because it gets you nowhere.
very
It
depressing.
really gets you nowhere, and then of course you get depressed and all these things, and then you write little notes like I did, which makes me feel that's one of the things writing does for me is I can
So I
express
reached
those
out,
things.
wanted to have a
Yeah,
conversation.
and then you guys, and then Hal reached out and said, hey, let's talk about this, and we talked, and it was very helpful to do that. And if I didn't have that outlet, I could see myself spiraling down quickly into a really shitty place. So that's where other people coming in
It,
and can save
this
you. It
is
can really
important.
help you.
This is important to realize. Go through phases. It's been a while since this happened. When I wake up in the morning and I make a conscious decision not to commit suicide today,
Okay.
and it's not because anything external has changed. It's the inner world, right?
And you remind me, and it's fine. I have this too, where my outlook changes so rapidly. It's like it only takes the smallest thing to send you on a spiral down, or in the same way to send you a spiral up, where you were like really happy. So a very small thing, and just a reach out from a friend, or just hey, how's it going? Like I'll see a note from Bruno in my WhatsApp, and where I'm like all of a sudden I'm like, oh wow, Bruno says hi, and it's like the greatest thing that happened for the day, which is
And he's real
stupid.
famous.
Right? It's like Bruno, who is this guy? I barely know the guy. Like I only met him a couple weeks ago, literally like a month ago or something. I met the guy. But I
Yeah,
saw, I see a note from him, and I'm like, wow. that made my day. It was like the dumbest thing ever. So, those little things, which is why I like to tell people you have a lot more power than you think you do. Because man, the stupidest little thing you can do sometimes really makes
Mm.
makes a huge
Well,
difference
yeah,
in a person's life.
what I gather from your both of you is that every man and woman is a star, and I would say that each one of us has a gift, each one of us has a contribution to make, each one of us is a life worth living, each one of us is a piece of carbon that can become a diamond. And I would say that in the act of giving or receiving, that is something that one has to keep an eye on. One has to keep an eye on not only helping the other person solve the problem or not asking for the other person to solve our problem, but we're actually asking everyone, to help. We're asking others to help us polish our own diamond, I would say, and that is really something that cheers us up immediately, because it's not only the problem at hand, but it is also the fact that we we are necessary, we have a role, we have a contribution to make, and we haven't figured it out yet. But when another person in the act of giving, and us in the act of receiving, solve the peculiar situation at hand, we also understand that in community, in developing our problems in communion, with others, something happens that goes beyond the solution of the problem, which is very important for our own psyche, for our own self-respect, for our own dignity. Dignity, I would say, is such an important virtue in the act of giving or receiving.
Yeah. And the way that the work is value, the value level of work in this society is so high. If you when you're not working, you are so diminished in everyone's eyes, and mostly in my case, my own eyes, because you look at the value people place on work. The first question people always ask you, well, what do you do? What do you do for a living? Or what are you doing? Where do you work? That's the very first question you always get from everybody. And the reason is that's how people identify other people in this society, what they do for a living, how they make money. That's how you are classified as a person, is what are you doing to make money now? And so and that's maybe not the best way to classify people, but it's the way that people are classified. And if you don't have an answer, well, I do nothing. I sit at home. I do a podcast with Bruno and Hal, Bruno and Hal once a week. And I don't make any money doing it. That doesn't get you very far in the hierarchy of society. But I mean, I'm obviously I'm exaggerating here, but it hurt. It can hurt, right? It make you feel diminished big time. And your dignity, if you have dignity or whatever. Like I don't really worry about dignity too much,
And
but if I had
don't
any,
you think that that happens a lot, because we are of the
oh
same
yeah,
generation,
yeah, for
and
sure.
we were brought white males in the Western Hemisphere. We were brought in the years of hard capitalism, and in the years of
Yes,
hard capitalism, we were taught that beyond having a name and beyond having a situation, we had to have a role, a job, a
yeah,
position, and
yeah,
to this aspect, I think that the contemporary time, the time that we're living now, is sort of solving that situation, because in the 80s or 90s, it was important to demonstrate that we could have a job and we could sustain ourselves. But right now, due to the process of concentration of wealth, you are, I mean, I constantly see people that do nothing and make a lot of money. And
I do too.
just like us, they do
Yeah.
nothing.
They're like
They
us, but
make,
except they make money
they
somehow.
make a lot
Right.
of money.
Somehow they're making money.
And I also see a lot of people, especially in
Right.
families and in situations that are a little bit more difficult, like a one person that sustains a family or things like that. I
Yeah.
see a lot of people that, work their ass off and they make
Yes.
a very little
No money.
wage and they are out of dignity. So,
Yeah.
I have sort of mentally left behind this situation of the job. I don't think it's so
Yeah.
important to explain what job I have. And I don't feel a lack of dignity if I say, well, I'm unemployed and I am trying to make a living writing or philosophizing or thinking. You
Right.
know what? I am thinking about the problems of today, because it seems nobody's thinking about the problems. Everyone is just solving his present situation. There's nobody thinking, in a more abstract level. Nobody's thinking. We're all thinking about the problems of tomorrow, how to pay the bill, how to pay the rent. But very few people are thinking about the problems for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years, for when
Seven
we're dead.
Well,
700.
it's fine
But
to say that, and I totally agree, Bruno, except for the fact that I've got to pay the bills, and that's what it comes down to, which sucks. It sucks, and it's the way it is. I have to have money. I have to have an income, and right now I don't have that, and so I'm relying on my wife and her income, which is not enough to support us both, really. And so we're really rapidly sliding down, and it's going to keep going. It's going to continue because I've got no income on the horizon here.
So
So it just makes things difficult.
Okay, but
Makes
but
it
you
the
have
pressure.
had
the
you have
12
had
of you,
experience.
sorry,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the 14 of you now, or 13 of you who are out there watching this right now, subscribe to Dan's Substack at a founding level. That'll move the needle.
Like,
Do it
I
now.
charge the lowest. I do charge the lowest amount Substack will allow, $30 a year for a subscription, which I don't know what that is.
And you
Like
can
50
be a,
cents, 5 cents a day or
be
something.
a founding member too at $100 a year.
At the same price, I think. Founding member, I think, is $30 also for a year. So
I'm pretty sure it's 100. Anyway,
is
don't
it 100?
go.
Oh man, I screwed that up.
Do it.
Well, it was the lowest amount Substack would have let me charge. I know that much.
What I wanted to say, Bruno, though, to your point, is about me. When I was at my wife was so shocked at her reunion last summer about this time. We were in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and people come up and ask me what I did for a living. I said, "Well, I run a small foundation. I'm the executive director. It's just
Sounds very
me.
impressive.
And
Very
all it
impressive.
does is create loose. It creates losses. Is all
I'm on
it
your
does.
board, by the way. I'm on the board of directors.
Yeah, you're on the board of directors because you're paying
Right. I
subscriber.
need to put that on my CV. Maybe that will help. Maybe that will help. I'm on the board of directors of the Hal Gill Foundation.
Harold B. Gill Foundation.
That's right, the Harold. Sorry, man.
to be
Sorry.
precise. And anybody who subscribes to me is on the board of directors, and my founding member is the chairman, though I never hear from him.
Right.
we talked once, and the guy's got a mouth like a sailor, but he was a great raconteur. He's also a writer, right? Like you are, Dan. And Dan's writing is really worth reading. It's intelligent nonsense. Bruno's film is worth seeing. I mentioned Il Futuro.
His writing is also very much worth reading as well. He's a very, very talented writer. Hal as well. Okay.
I'm not so talented.
That's okay.
I'm thinking like Bruno is in the big picture, 700-year increments. I'm thinking in what are we going to do? We need to be good ancestors, right? And so I'm trying to think that every action we take, how you think about time travel, you go back in time to one little thing and it changes all of history. We're doing that now. And every change we make, because of the acceleration of everything, the acceleration of knowledge, which causing tremendous upheavals. And we need to be thinking about it consciously and with awakening and awareness. And that's what I do at Daily Provisions these days. I'm awake and aware. I'm looking at people and watching them and having interactions with them and doing little philosophical things. I will give them a side of philosophy when they order a bagel. But we don't make bagels. We make crullers. But anyway, you get the point. Go ahead.
I don't believe I'm gonna talk a little bit about this punctual thing, but let's go back to the subject. Concerning the Substack model, I don't believe in subscriptions, and I don't think it's the way to go. I am very happy when people read my long articles. That is what I like, and that's the only index I am interested, because I have 300 subscribers, but my articles I read by 400, 500 people, which I think is great, because this actually in the long articles is where I articulate things that I want to say and that I want to leave for the future. Now, in the present times that we live now, I find amazing that anyone today, with this attention economy and with this monetization of our time, I find it amazing that people take the time to write a book. So the way I am contributing to others is that I buy books, as I've told you in the last chat.
Right.
So, for example, I bought this book from Hawthorne Rabotat, who I met here in Substack. He's a high school professor from the States. And I also bought this one, Basil Key or Nikolai Kote. He's a Ukrainian young guy that also writes, And imagine that I listen to them and I buy the book, and then the book takes like 3 weeks to arrive here in Italy. And then I read the book, and then I talk to them about the book, and then I write a commentary about the book, and that would be my contribution.
That's a good contribution.
It really is a great thing to do. It's very old school in a way, but it's very cool. Very cool.
Anyone can do this for each other. And that's what I think also. I do think there's a Substack as an economic engine for creatives does have promise. It's not realizing it because a lot of us don't believe it. And therefore we don't subscribe to each other. I've subscribed to a lot, actually. I need to cut it back. But I want to move the needle for somebody else. And the gift is freely given. And when without expectation, sometimes somebody writes to me. I had a response from one particular individual who said it really made a big difference to her and her daughter at a tough time. So,
I
like you
think
were saying, Dan, that sort of made my day. I don't know who this person is even. They have
yeah,
some sort of
reading the writing of a person, be it a post or an article or a book, is very similar to what Dan says, which when you're having a very rough day and somebody calls and says, "How are you doing?" and "What's wrong?" and you can talk to me and I will listen to you. This thing about listening and giving positive feedback, or reading and giving positive feedback, is already something that if you do it well, it takes time. And also you are somehow creating virtue in yourself and in the other, because you're really going into it. It's not just a small talk, but it's rather the articulation of a dialogue between two people.
There's another thing that could be done, which I think is important, almost as important as really deep reading and responding in, you know, language to a person, which does take up time, by the way. When I respond to a person and they read me, I'm taking up their time. So it's actually a transaction that happens. But I wanted to point out restacking, because when I restack something, my network gets an opportunity to see what I'm restacking. Liking doesn't do much, but restacking actually does. And that's something kind of unique to Substack. Amplifying people's signals to your own network just in a click can have an impact potentially, in that somebody who would not have seen it otherwise may see it and may do exactly what Bruno is saying and actually start responding. I mean, the fact we're talking right now was dent by dent of going live from a metro train running out to the Dulles International Airport for no good reason and talking to Dan as he was walking on the beach, I think.
To that tactic, Hal, I agree with your tactic, but I have a critical observation to make about it.
Of course you do.
Of course I do. Sorry.
Go ahead.
And I will accept it, which is, retweeting or restacking is only worth it if, when you repost, you add your own point of view, like you introduce why you are sharing this. Because if you just
I
share,
don't always have the time.
well, but the
But I
general
can do that, and I restack with a note quite often, and I do highly recommend doing that as well.
Look, the observation is critical, because there is a danger to retweeting or restacking without sharing your point of view. I mean, your point of view can be at least, "I approve of this message," minimal.
Oh, I disapprove.
I find this horrible, or I find this great, or this
Only
guy.
horrible might draw more people.
Exactly.
And lying about it. We can all lie about things, right? Go ahead.
We can lie about things, but I think that lying is less dangerous than ambiguity. I think ambiguity is very dangerous. And look, I'll explain this to you with a political example, which is when Brexit happened, when the British voted, to leave or not the European Union. Twitter was on the rise, and it was not yet from Musk, And as you well know, there was an intervention of the Russians, and there was also an intervention of Cambridge Analytica, which basically made everyone talk about Brexit, and state their positions in Twitter. And so many British people were writing in Twitter their position about, leaving or not leaving the European Union. And then suddenly a lot of people began getting enraged, and would say no because of immigration, or yes because there's so many benefits in the European Union, or no because we are becoming a poor country and we're too much worried about Europe and not the island, etc. And so there's a phenomenon that happened in Twitter in those years. I'm talking about 2016, which is that somebody would say something scandalous. For example, a person would say, "We have to leave the European Union because migration is destroying Britain." And I would look at this post and I would find it scandalous, because migration is a scapegoat. It's not the cause for why a nation state is working on. And so I would retweet it, but I would retweet it because I would be scandalized by it. But some other people would receive this message and would agree with me, but it's not with me, it's with the guy that wrote the first post. And so I would be sort of an ambassador in favor of prohibiting migration, whereas it was not my intention, So retweeting, reposting, restacking can be severely ambiguous and can produce actually the opposite reaction of what you want to do. This is why I think that it's very dangerous to just, when you retweet, you are endorsing. This is the point, And so you have to be careful with what and how you endorse.
That may be true. I'm not very careful. I'm an agent of chaos.
Yeah, but going back to our subject matter, we're talking about giving and receiving. We're talking about compassion. We're talking about creating virtue. So if you're only an agent of chaos, then that means that you give a shit about virtue.
I don't know about virtue. I think we also, Dan, what do you think?
What do I think about what part?
All of it. Just
One
wing it.
thing, okay, virtue and ethics. One thing somebody told me one time that I think is really, really important to remember, and I think it's very true about ethics, is if you're talking about it, that probably means that you're at least approaching it being ethical. If it's quiet, if it's under wraps, if you never talk about it, if it's all quiet and hush hush or whatever, then it maybe isn't. And one of the easiest ways to know if a decision you're going to make is an ethical decision or it's a virtuous thing to do is to talk to other people about it and get their opinions. And if you start talking about ethics and what's right and what's wrong with people, it doesn't even really matter who the people are. They can be the shittiest people in the world. But even just talking with shitty people about what's right and what's wrong about ethical questions, like what we're doing here today, is it a really good sign that what you're doing is probably the right thing to do, or it will be, because you're going to talk it with other people, and they're going to tell you that what you're thinking is stupid, or what you're thinking is unethical, or it is ethical, or whatever you want to say, or virtue not virtuous. I know I'm not addressing any of the points you guys were talking about, but it was just occurred to me that it was a really good piece of advice that I got a very long time ago about ethics, and people think ethics are very complicated, and they are really complicated, and you don't know what's ethical and what's not, but other people do typically. And if you talk to enough people about something, a decision or whatever, and you ask enough people their opinions about it, you'll eventually come to typically the right decision in the end, I think. Unless you're in the Trump administration.
For
Then you
your
may not.
okay, let's land it down. Virtue is the practice of a habit. It's the repeated practice of a habit, and I mean, it's a repeated action that becomes a habit that has to be controlled by reasoning, by the right reason to think about it. Why do you repeat it? And also by the right disposition, by the right temperament, by the right temperance. That would be Aristotelian definition of virtue. And what I like, I am not particularly a Christian, but what I like about, the main contribution that I like about Jesus is that Jesus says, okay, if you are practicing something and you have to determine what habits do you enforce and what habits do you leave behind. Practicing sport, washing your teeth could be considered virtuous, but not feeding yourself appropriately or being a gossipy person could be wrong habits. And therefore your reason tells you what is correct to repeat, and the right disposition, the right temperament helps you to make the right choice. And what I like about Jesus is that Jesus added into ethic virtue Aristotle the importance of having friends or people that know you, that give you their opinion, that correct your ways, that tell you that's right, that's a very good thing to do, that's a wrong thing to do. The supervision of our friends is super important for the formation of virtue, which makes sense. It makes, for example, sense. Why are we talking now? We're basically sharing with you and with the listeners, what is right and what is wrong, which is something that in the end we build in community.
I wonder. I think I'm not virtuous. I think I'm actually not open as much as I think I am sometimes after listening to the two of you. And so I'm learning, as I go along, and it's always mind expanding to get the perspectives of other people, because it's very different from my perspective. My perspective tends to have a lot to do with
hippies.
I myself am special.
Okay, sorry. Yes, right.
You are what?
You're
I'm
what?
nothing special. In other words, I'm
That's
listening
true.
to
You're correct on that.
ways-
You're correct on that part.
and thank you. I'm again right.
That's right. You got that part right.
Right. Always right. Anyway, my wife is always right. I'm Mr. Right. So anyway, the bottom line for me though is the fact that I think I'm nothing special. I think that I am this character who has been cast into life without a map, and we all are, I believe, and we're all traumatized primates, and we act that way. What we see is primate behavior of trying to one up each other and feeling like, and we're also used to scarcity. So we tend to pack it in, as much as we can. And we're in an age of abundance, a lot of us anyway, and it's unevenly distributed. So how can I, in giving, a big part of my thing has been, I've got too much. I need to shuffle some off. And I see that, oh, this could have ripple effects, and that person's really talented, and I want to support them and push their agenda forward, as opposed to really having an agenda of my own. So I'm interested in amplifying signals of that I perceive to be virtuous through the noise of cyberspace. And that's
Well,
why
And
restacking.
and yeah, I
And
think
that's
that's a
why
great thing
I
to do.
advocate
Uh,
that everyone amplifies signals they think are good so that we
yeah.
can come to a consensus that'll move civilization forward a step. Like a mycelial network underneath of this, what does you call it, hard capitalism,
yes,
which we which will run us into the ground. I mean, the system is going to run us into the
we're
ground.
past that stage.
You know, doomed earlier.
We are late capitalism. But you know, you are the way you're describing yourself. You're describing yourself as a very good student of Aristotle. You're practicing virtue theory perfectly well. And you know, I would, you know, the virtue that the virtue that sustains this podcast is that we three, we pay
Mhm.
attention to each other. We read what the other one writes. We go to the post the other one posts. We join the other on the subject matters that he wants to talk about. We talk, but we also give space for the other one to talk. We're patient. We are elaborating. Also, we're trying to get somewhere that is above us. You know, you have a meaning, and I have a meaning, and you have a meaning, but we want to reach a sense which is above us. And even the way we choose the topic is very organic, you know. And this is the chaotic element that you bring into this podcast, Hal, which is, you know, when we just established one rule, which is let's do one podcast a week on Thursdays and talk about something. But let's talk about something. Which is a rule. It is a rule that I propose. Let's talk about one thing per podcast. You know, let's not just be uh, chaotic totally. But the virtue that sustains this podcast is that we come into this space with a topic, not more than that, but we have paid attention to the others, the other two, throughout the week. This is already a great virtue, I would say, because you know there's endless amount of content in Substack, you know, and I could be reading 100 people, but I pay more attention to what you write and talk about, so that my mind begins to wonder what I am going to talk about on the podcast, you see. And so there is a repetition of a practice. We are actually practicing how to build a podcast, and we're doing it in a very virtuous manner. And this is something that I'm more sharing with our listeners than with you too, because I know you will agree with me. But I think it's very interesting that we've set a minimum amount of rules, because you know you both are very rebels. I'm more kind of a structured guy, but we've established a minimum amount of one rule, you know, one topic, once a week, not more than that. But that decision is supported by the fact that we have the habit of paying attention to each other, listening to each other, reading what the other one writes, etc. You know, and I think that's what makes the podcast a virtuous podcast. And with time it will get better and better. I believe in it.
Maybe we should
And
change the
then
name then.
also
Let's change the
strategy.
name to the Virtuous Podcast. I think that you're right. You're right, Bruno. Sorry, and you made me feel much better about my participation here. I was just thinking, some stupid podcast I do, but now, now I understand. It's got a much deeper meaning to it. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. That was really nice. That was very well said, Bruno. Actually, very well said, and it did make me feel very good about the podcast. I hadn't thought that deeply about it, and you think very deeply about many things. I know that was one of the things I love about you, and so but that was well said. And I like the name actually, Virtuous Podcast, because yeah,
Right?
it is virtuous in that in that manner. I totally agree. I appreciate that perspective.
And
Sure.
this listening you're talking about, so important to listen to and take in these different kind of tones from our different perspectives. I think that's improvisation, right? At some level. But the topic is we're giving each other our time, we're giving each other our perspectives, and we're sort of mixing them together to see what kind of
Well,
structures come out of them.
I mean, when
And
you hang out with friends, this is how you. People don't have friends anymore. I know these days, no one has friends like they. Maybe
no,
they
I
do,
saw
but it
that
feels
too.
like nobody has friends. But when you have friends, this is how you interact with them. You sit around and you talk about stuff, and it goes back and forth, and then people have their say, and and you laugh and whatever you joke. But
We're
it's we're
staying
just
together
we're
for an
filming
hour.
that, so
We're staying
it seems
together for an
unusual.
hour.
I guess it seems unusual because people don't have friends these days. I mean, now or usually you don't get together with friends maybe for that long, or
There
maybe
is
you
that,
do. I don't know. But
there is that aspect of insularity, but I
it
do
feels
feel
like people just don't have that sense anymore of like what it's like to have a group of friends that you hang out with and regularly. And I know it's different in younger in college and whatnot when you do have that, but as you get older, more towards our age and even a little younger and such, you lose that, right? But it sucks to lose that. You really need to have that in your life. At least I do, or else you just get very insulated and you can really lose touch
I
with
did an
people.
experiment recently where I was getting together with the same group of people every morning practically for about 8 years, and it got under my skin a bit, and I realized I'm gonna do an experiment. I'm gonna
Could
back
happen
off,
here.
and I'm
Yeah,
gonna wander away, and I'm gonna see how many people give a shit.
yeah.
Maybe 1, maybe 2. I think there are about 2 people that really, or maybe 3, that really stayed in touch after that out of, like, I was usually sitting around with, like, 30 to 50 people with whom
Okay.
I've been together with for 8 freaking years, almost every goddamn morning. So this sort of told me about our society and where we are these days. I might as well have died as far as they were concerned, and it might as well have been nobody in particular. That's why I say I'm nobody special, and I like that sort of ghost-like awareness that I am often not seen at all. I had a friend, my lawyer, actually. She is my lawyer because of this. She saw me dressed differently one day in a place we usually went, and she said, "Oh, I didn't see you there." And I said, "Yeah, it's hard to see other people." And she said, "I'll have to think about that." And I immediately knew I liked her on that basis because she was gonna take into consideration some crappy little snarky phrase that I used to sort of awaken, shock us into awareness of how little we're taking in and how asleep we are at the wheel. I liked G.I. Gurdjieff's fourth way, where the living life you're doing, if you do it more awakened and aware, you have an opportunity to really live life as opposed to just sleepwalk through it. Hi, what do you guys think?
I mean, it's not that you are not special. I prefer to say each one of us is special. Every man and
Yeah.
woman is a star. I think that is a
Oh,
more, yeah, it's a lyric actually. It's from a song,
was it?
but I prefer to start with it, because that positions respect at the basis of a relation. Which is, if I'm gonna talk to you, it's because I'm gonna pay attention to you. Otherwise, why bother?
Yeah.
And concerning friendship, Cicero, who makes an evolution on the theory of virtue. Cicero would say that the only way to build friendship is to take care of the virtue of your friends.
Hmm.
Ensure that your friends get better. Help them not only on the specific things for which your friends call you, but ensure that they progress into a life that is fulfilled, happy. So, with
Now
not.
remind us who Cicero was again, for those who may not be as history fluent as others. Cicero was
Who is Cicero?
who was Cicero? Yes, remind us. Remind the audience here and myself as well. Cicero, I know the name quite well, but I can't place Cicero in history.
I
If
wanted
you
to
could,
see if it was in this one. This is why is there something rather than nothing?
Who's the author?
Um, it is Leszek Kolakowski. See his name there.
Why? Okay, and what about this?
I wanted to see if Cicero was in it. He's not. I'm sorry, but tell us about Cicero.
Okay, Cicero was a consul in the first century, and he was a consul. He was a lawyer. He's actually the father of lawyers. We could consider Cicero the first lawyer. It's not true. Actually, lawyers existed in ancient Greece, but Cicero was the first official lawyer, and he was an advisor to the triumvirates, which was the system of government that Rome gave itself after the death of Julius Caesar, which is the transition from the republic to the empire. And Cicero had a political worry, which is that Cicero agreed that the transition required a strong figure to gather the power that was lost with the murder of Caesar, but he also warned about the surges of dictators, and why a dictator in the end is the most lonely figure in the universe, because the dictator is a person who can't have friends, basically, and the dictator is a person who due to the exercise of power in a non-virtuous manner, ends up not paying attention to what is being said to him, not listening, and therefore not developing the appropriate friendship which would guide his decisions to make of the republic a better republic. And therefore, he said for the adequate construction of a republic, we need friendship. We need to be friends with each other. If there's no friendship, then we will end in a dictatorship, which is pretty much what is happening now, due to several reasons, COVID and excessive capitalism and Protestant individualism, and so many reasons. We have become an archipelago of individualities, and the sense of communities lost, and we are not really building community the way we used to do. And we now have lunch or dinner with 2 or 3 friends, but the last time we had dinner with 20 friends happened a century ago.
Even the 2 or 3 friends, I think, is a stretch for most people.
Yeah, we all only have 2 or 3 friends, and this is not only a problem to the way we need to be supervised so that we become more virtuous. We need friends so that we are better people, but also we need friends so that we build a better republic, a better democracy. If there's no friendship, there's no possibility that we will come up with a better political system to administrate justice, for example, and therefore injustice will prevail. Okay, that's a summary of Cicero.
Yeah, and then he's right. Cicero is a very smart man, because you look at the administration currently, and I hate to brag on them as I constantly do, but there's nobody saying, "Oh, I'm Trump's best friend." You don't see. I don't think I've ever heard anybody call themselves a friend in a real way. Anyone who's a friend is not really a friend. It's a convenience, a friend of convenience. And I think if you look at the administration, I would suggest many of the people in the administration do not have a lot of friends, and probably do not value friendships very highly.
Yeah, it's definitely a transactional kind of thing. And that's the real danger, I think, that our late stage capitalism is that we've begun to view everything as a transaction. Like I said, when I was younger, I viewed my romantic relationships as transactional. I do this for you, you do this for me. And if they didn't do this for me, I got resentful and the relationship blew up. And resentment is something that I like to go into a lot. Resentment, in fact, the way Nietzsche talks about it, it's a really damning thing. But we need to, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps.
Ties into jealousy is too. I mean, jealousy, resentment, those things go hand in hand. And jealousy for me is the what do you call it? The deadliest sin. The deadliest sin for me is jealousy by far of the deadly sins. The 7 deadly sins, I consider jealousy by far the most damaging and deadly sin, because it is so destructive in so many ways.
Resentfulness and envy and greed and jealousy, these are all vices, and vices oppose virtues.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow, we should really get a chart and write this up. Visuals. I like visuals of these.
This is a little too low budget podcast for that, Hal. You're on a different podcast.
No. I'm not generate it after the fact.
We're way too low budget.
Write it in an article, because I did write up in an article, right? The other day.
Yeah, that is a good thing about these podcasts too. They give me ideas for things to write about. I've had a couple just out of the discussion we've had here. So I appreciate that. I very much appreciate that.
Yeah, I do too. I really wish I could go on and on and on about it. We are at 1:58. I noticed. So we got about 2 minutes to sum up if we want to. If we want to keep it within an hour, do we want to do that, or do we want to run?
I think we should. I'm one of these guys that's really anal about meetings. I want them to start on time and end on time. So unless there's a big time, this isn't really necessarily a meeting. This is more of a get together. So I'm a little bit okay with it running a little bit over, but. I think as long as
actually we have more than one rule. We have one rule, which is a topic and a date and time, but we also have the rule that Daniel stated, which is 1 hour, not more than 1 hour. And I've always been respectful.
I think as long as there's an understanding that anyone can drop off. If the other 2 want to stay on, I got no problem with that. But as long as the understanding is, you can go without any kind of a.
The audience would be very helpful, I would say, because if none of our listeners posts any comment or any question, would probably cut it. But if a fourth voice comes in and says something, it will inspire us to add something into the conversation. But anyway,
I'd love to hear from our audience. So you're encouraged, if you're still listening, haven't dropped off, to chime in. Otherwise,
I'm going to have you on the show. I'm happy to bring you on too. If you want, we'll invite you on. You can have your say actually in person. I wanted to do that with the Onion King or whatever his name was. The Onion King, not the Onion King. What's his name? The Onion guy. What's this guy's name? The French Onion guy, whatever. I can't remember his name, but he had a funny name. It was a good name. But we tried to get him on the one. Hal and I, sorry, Bruno, you were on this one, but Hal and I did a quick impromptu
That's
little
true. You
broadcast
did a
deal.
little
And I
impromptu
really
one.
wanted to get the guy on it, but it was at the very end, and it somehow didn't work out. We couldn't get it to go. But any audience member who wants to come on, we could just send
How
you an invite, and
often?
you can pop on.
How often do you guys show up? Is the question. And Bruno mentioned every Thursday, but I can't guarantee that. Last
Once a
time it
week.
was Friday,
Once
and this time
I
it's
get
Thursday. It's really driven by my schedule
yeah, right.
because
Yeah,
I
no, you're the
work.
only one working. You're the only
I
one
have a
working.
job.
Come on.
But I would
Jeez.
like to plug people too. If you're in Washington, D.C., come by Q and Connecticut Avenue to Daily
Right.
Provisions. See me there.
Right. If you're
we,
in Tijuana, Mexico, come by. You're welcome
we
to
do
stay at my place. I've got a huge
we do
place.
respect that. We do respect the time. We're always meeting at the
Yes.
same time, but
Yeah.
we
Any day.
either do it Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. That's basically how. But the answer to Omix Intel would be weekly. We got a weekly.
Yeah, we're
Um,
trying to do weekly, definitely.
I don't want to wrap up, but I want to push a last concept into this conversation, which is
Sure.
altruism. Okay, altruism.
Yes.
And altruism is the question now. Now that we brought friendship into the subject matter, I think it's important because we started talking about giving and receiving in regards to acquaintances or people that we meet. But when we talk about friends, the act of giving and receiving goes into a different level, which is building up friendship, taking care of the other. A politics of care comes into the conversation, a politics of continuity, a respect for the other person, a memory also, like remembering what we talked the last time so that the conversation goes somewhere else and it's not always a 0 degree. Our conversations tend to evolve into something else. So now I want to go one step further, from the acquaintance to the friend. Now let's go to world politics, which is altruism. For example, how do we solve the problem of poverty? How do we solve the problem of war? How do we solve the problem of government? How do we solve the problem of elected representatives? And when we state the question of how do we give to a person we meet, or how do we give to a person that is our friend, we can also make the question as how do we give in such a manner that we solve the world problem? How do we agree on solving key issues, which are massive, and I would say right now, poverty, war, human rights are very important, massive planetary problems. And just the worry, just the general worry about these issues is already a guiding light for building virtue, which is, for example, when Daniel says, I am suffering and I don't have a job and I feel useless because I can't say that I don't have a job and therefore I have a problem of dignity. But at the same time, we recognize that we have a roof and we have food and we have internet, and therefore our situation is already better than 65% of the population who doesn't have a roof, who doesn't have food, who doesn't have an internet connection, who doesn't have time to read or write, who doesn't have time to anything but survival mode. And so I would immediately say, that bringing the world now out of survival mode is a very important guiding light on how do we act, how do we become more virtuous. If every little action that we do contributes to better respect for human rights, contributes to the resolution of poverty, contributes to the end of wars, we are on the right track, I would say.
There's some big goals there. Those are the big goals for the podcast. And we're going to end war as we know it. But I totally respect that. I totally agree. And the thing I would say is those problems that you talk about have always been the problems, the major problems of the planet. I think there's never been a time period since humanity began where those weren't, I guess, except the very beginning, when those weren't the issue. So we want to take us back to the pre, or there were a lot less people, but we've always had these problems. But why is a great question. Why have we always had them? Well, why can't we solve them? And we got to try. Why not try?
I disagree. Yeah, we haven't always had these problems, but beyond disagreeing or not historically with that assertion, what I would say is that we are supposed to be. When I was in the 90s, I expected 2020 to be a totally different decade than what it is being now. I expected that we would be on the process of solving things. And on these matters, I would say that in the last 20, 25 years, we've gone down, not up. And I am just like Hal, I am not going to solve the world problem, but I'm going to leave this world at least having made a contribution. And making a contribution means ensuring that at least we're going uphill and not downhill, So I would say that the comparison, the fact that these problems have always existed, well, I mean, we could also say that, at the primate level, these problems didn't even exist, Primates were not worried about you being hungry or you being educated or not. These are new problems. I am more worried about the fact that we at least ensure that we're going uphill and not downhill. And I have the feeling that we're going downhill, but I also have the feeling, the intuition that we're all worrying about the fact that we're going downhill. And therefore there is a reflection, a general reflection in every one of us, as to how at least we can tilt the scale a little bit, so that we once again go uphill in this matter.
That's an optimistic. I mean, I'm going to disagree with you on that. That's an optimistic outlook. I think there's a chunk of the population that is not worried, thinks things are going great, is very happy with the situation, and wants it to continue. And I don't know how big that chunk is, but it could certainly exist, because if everybody thought like we did, the situation would not be what it is. So clearly other people disagree with that. And who those people are and why they disagree, I'd love to understand, and I still don't. But I guess they have a fundamentally different outlook.
It has a lot to do with being asleep at the wheel, I believe, at some
mean,
level.
I don't know. Maybe at some level.
That part of it.
Yeah.
Now, part of the population is asleep at the wheel, doesn't care. Most of us are innervated. We have gotten so much in us about, we're kind of numbed. Another one is, I believe, that historical trends being what they are, we occasionally drive ourselves into a crisis mode and we go over the cliff, and then we rebuild from there if we survive as a species. That's a big question right now, I believe, too. I think we are facing existential crises.
But who's driving the car, Hal? Who's driving the car and why? And you're saying it's because they're asleep at the wheel. I'm saying they're not asleep. They're wide awake, and they're actively evil. They actually want to crash and burn.
I have thought this, that the 0.01% will be just fine with the die-off of the 99.9%.
Yeah, I mean,
and it may be by design. And I'm willing to engage in a conversation about that. And I'm willing to be a part of the 0.01% if anybody's listening.
Yeah, right. Except for the evil part. I'll do all the other stuff.
We can be very scientific because you're very dialectical and very Marxist, like the pendulum of history. Like we go great and we go into disaster, and the pendulum of history moves like this, and we're just being swayed. But at the same time,
we are a very brief species. We are just gotten here.
Yes, in the grand scheme of things, yes, it is. That is true.
But at the same time,
comprehend the cosmos. My God.
But at the same time, from the cosmos, from the universe that we are conscientious of, we are the most evolved ones. So if there is any kind of solution, it will come from us. It will come from this 0.1%, from this critical mass. And I would say that critical mass, which is a concept that you haven't added into your pendulum of history, critical mass is important, which is you don't need the 100% to produce a positive change, but you do need a critical mass of people to produce a critical change. And therefore, critical mass can be an achievable goal.
I want to end with my last statement, which is a quote from my father's history professor at William & Mary, which was that man is the pinnacle of creation, but only man has ever said so.
Maybe next time we can talk about the impact of the discovery of an intelligent alien species, what impact that would have on the planetary politics and the world. That could be an interesting topic of discussion. But
I've been ignoring the UAP thing, but apparently it's a thing.
But then that's been getting hot. That's really a lot of people are talking about this now. But in any event, thanks guys. It was fun again. Really fun.
Yep.
Nice. Had a good time.
See you next week.
Yep. See you next time. Stay in touch, man. And thanks to the audience whoever joined. Appreciate it. Later.
Bye.
La vista. Where's my end button? There it is. Bye, Bruno.